The glass tower of Elon Lux's corporate headquarters gleamed under the morning sun, its pristine reflection a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Alexandra Carter. She stood at the window of her corner office, her manicured fingers wrapped tightly around a printed report. The words "toxic work environment" at Elon Lux's flagship store *** were splashed across the page in bold, damning letters. Alexandra's company had been built on a promise: luxury with a conscience. She had spent over a decade cultivating an empire that catered to the world's elite, yet prided itself on treating employees with dignity. Or so she had thought. The exposé, written by an anonymous whistleblower, told a different story. Employees allegedly suffered under relentless quotas, verbal abuse from management, and customers who viewed them as little more than decor. One employee had written that the store was a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside but suffocating within. Disgust curled in Alexandra's stomach. Had she really become so disconnected? Her assistant, David, hesitated at the doorway. "Ma'am, I know that look. Whatever you're thinking." "I need to see for myself," she interrupted, her voice carrying the edge of a decision already made. David sighed. "Undercover." "It's the only way," Alexandra said. "If I show up as CEO, they'll put on a performance. I need to be in the trenches, feel what they feel." David's skepticism was evident. "You haven't worked a retail floor in 15 years. "Then it's time I remember." By the end of the day, Lexi Harris was born. Alexandra traded her sharp designer suits for thrift store jeans and a faded blouse. Her sleek blonde hair was dyed a dull brown and tied in a lazy ponytail. Makeup was replaced by the natural weariness of a woman who had seen struggle. David had even arranged a backstory. A single mother looking for work after a bitter divorce, barely scraping by. It was a stark contrast to the reality of Alexandra Carter, billionaire CEO. 2 days later, she stepped through the doors of Elon Lux's flagship store, not as its owner, but as another desperate applicant in search of a paycheck. The boutique was as breathtaking as she remembered. High ceilings, gleaming marble floors, and soft golden lighting that made everything and everyone look flawless. Mannequins adorned in silk and cashmere posed like museum sculptures, while a symphony of whispered conversations and muted footsteps filled the air. It was a temple of opulence. Yet beneath its polish, something felt off. The moment Lexi approached the reception desk, the woman behind it barely looked up. "Application," she asked in a clipped tone, manicured nails tapping impatiently against the glass counter. Lexi handed over the paperwork, deliberately shifting her posture to appear unsure, hesitant. She had spent years commanding rooms with a single glance, but today she was nobody. The woman barely skimmed the pages before waving her off. "Manager's office. End of the hall." Lexi murmured a thanks and wove through the store, taking in the employees. A sleek young man in a fitted suit lounged behind the jewelry counter, smirking as a woman in a budget-friendly outfit admired a necklace she would never afford. Across the room, a tired-looking cashier forced a smile as a wealthy patron berated her over a non-existent flaw in a handbag. None of it sat right. At the end of the hall, the manager's office loomed like a judge's chambers. Vanessa Harding, store manager, was reviewing something on her computer when Lexi stepped in. A woman in her 40s, Vanessa carried herself with the entitled air of someone who enjoyed power in small doses. Her eyes, a cold, assessing blue, flicked up without interest. "You the new hire?" she asked, barely masking her boredom. Lexi nodded. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, sighing. "I'll be honest, we're not desperate." "You're lucky I even have time for this." Lexi swallowed back the irritation rising in her throat. "I really need this job." Vanessa smirked, clearly enjoying the display of need. "All right, Lexi. Basic rules. No standing around. Customers with money get priority. Don't waste time on browsers. And for God's sake, look presentable." Her eyes flicked to Lexi's worn-out shoes, her expression one of barely concealed distaste. "I understand," Lexi said. Vanessa handed her a sales badge. "You'll shadow Mia today. Follow her lead. But don't get comfortable. I have no patience for dead weight. The warning was clear. You're disposable. Mia turned out to be a petite woman in her mid-20s with tired brown eyes and a warm smile that barely hid the exhaustion beneath it. Unlike the others, she didn't immediately dismiss Lexi. "Welcome to the jungle," Mia whispered as she adjusted a rack of silk blouses. Lexi forced a chuckle. "That bad?" Mia gave her a look that spoke volumes. "You'll see." The day was a baptism by fire. Lexi wasn't given time to ease in. She was expected to know, to adapt, to sell. But she wasn't prepared for how relentless it was. The customers were demanding, some outright cruel. One woman snapped her fingers at Lexi like she was a servant. Another dismissed her with a wave before she even finished a greeting. And then there were the sharks, employees who thrived in this predatory environment. They swooped in the moment Lexi hesitated, stealing sales, smirking at her incompetence. Vanessa watched everything, unimpressed. By lunchtime, Lexi's feet ached, and her pride was in shambles. How had she been so blind? The store she had envisioned as a dream job was nothing more than a high-end battlefield. Employees weren't thriving. They were surviving. Mia offered a sympathetic smile as they took their break in the cramped backroom. "It's a lot, huh?" Lexi exhaled. "It's different than I expected." Mia snorted. "That's the polite way of putting it." She hesitated, then added, "You seem nice. Don't take this the wrong way, but don't get too attached. Most new hires don't last a month." Lexi frowned. "Why?" Mia glanced toward the door before lowering her voice. "Because Vanessa will squeeze you dry and toss you the moment you're no longer useful." A sharp clatter cut their conversation short. The backroom door flew open, and Vanessa stepped in, arms crossed. "Break time's over," she snapped. Her gaze landed on Lexi. "Let's see if you can actually sell something, or if you're just another waste of payroll." The hostility in Vanessa's tone was unmistakable. This was a test, a challenge. Lexi squared her shoulders. "All right," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Let's see." As she followed Vanessa back onto the sales floor, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. This was no longer about an undercover experiment. This was war. And Alexandra Carter never lost a war. The store hummed with a quiet, artificial elegance, a place where wealth wrapped itself in silk and whispered in exclusivity. Yet behind the facade of effortless luxury, Alexandra, still Lexi to those around her, was beginning to see the rot. The cracks were not subtle, nor were they easy to ignore. They ran deep, like fractures in glass, invisible until pressure was applied. Vanessa was the most obvious problem, ruling the boutique with an iron grip disguised as corporate efficiency. She prowled the sales floor with sharp heels and sharper words, ensuring employees never stood idle, never relaxed. Productivity, in her eyes, was measured by numbers, not morale. A sale was the only thing that mattered, and anyone who failed to meet expectations became expendable. Lexi was learning that firsthand. "Why are you standing there?" Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a whip. Lexi turned from the display she was straightening. "Just finished organizing." "Did I ask for an explanation?" Vanessa folded her arms, expression cool. "You're here to sell, not decorate. If I see you wasting time again, don't bother clocking in tomorrow." Lexi clenched her jaw, but nodded. Mia shot her a sympathetic glance from across the room, but neither of them dared to speak. Confrontation meant consequences, and in Vanessa's domain, consequences could be brutal. Lexi had never felt this kind of pressure before. In the corporate world, she was untouchable. Here, she was disposable. The customers, though, were a revelation of their own. Wealth did not equate to kindness, nor did luxury invite grace. Many treated the store as their personal kingdom, and the employees as lesser subjects. Some ignored her entirely, their gazes sliding past as if she were invisible. Others assessed her with veiled condescension, questioning her knowledge, her presence, even her worth. The worst ones made a game of it. A woman in towering stilettos, drowning in perfume, eyed Lexi like one might observe a stray dog. She lifted a scarf from a nearby rack, holding it between two fingers. "This is cashmere?" she asked, disbelief dripping from her tone. Lexi nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's hand-woven, imported from." The woman tossed it onto the counter. "It feels cheap. I assure you, it's of the highest quality." The woman laughed, short and sharp. "Oh, sweetie, you wouldn't know high quality if it smacked you in the face." Lexi's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to smile. She had built this brand. She knew every stitch, every thread. And yet, in this moment, she was nothing. Vanessa watched from a distance, smirking. Mia later whispered to her, "That's Madeline Kessler. Old money. Comes in once a month just to break someone." Lexi exhaled slowly. "And we just let that happen?" Mia shrugged. "If we push back, Vanessa says we're damaging the client experience." It was infuriating. Alexandra had envisioned Elon Lux as a place of sophistication, but it was little more than a feeding ground, where the rich flaunted power and the employees absorbed their venom. But nothing compared to the moment she realized the true cost of working here. It was after closing, long after the doors had locked and the last customers had disappeared into the night. The sales team gathered near the registers, waiting for their final numbers to be tallied. There was tension in the air, the unspoken dread of those who knew punishment was inevitable. Vanessa stood in front of them, clipboard in hand. "All right, let's see who actually pulled their weight today." One by one, she read out sales figures. Those who met their quotas were met with a nod, a flick of approval. Those who didn't receive a pointed stare, a silent warning. Then she reached Mia. 500 short, Vanessa said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "That's 2 days in a row, Mia." Mia stiffened. "I tried." "I don't care what you tried," Vanessa interrupted. "I care about results." There was a long, awful silence. Mia's hands tightened into fists at her sides. "Maybe I can make it up tomorrow," she offered. Vanessa tilted her head. "Or maybe you shouldn't bother coming in at all." Lexi's pulse spiked. "Wait." Vanessa's gaze snapped at her. "What?" Lexi hesitated. "She's one of the best people here." Vanessa's smile was slow, predatory. "And yet, she's failing. You want to defend her? Fine. Cover her shortfall with your own sales." Lexi froze. Vanessa smirked. "Didn't think so." She turned back to Mia. "Get your act together, or you're gone." Mia swallowed, nodding once. The meeting ended, and everyone scattered. But Lexi stayed, watching as Mia slumped against the counter, rubbing her temples. "You okay?" Lexi asked softly. Mia let out a dry laugh. "Oh, just another day in hell." Lexi hesitated before asking, "Do they really fire people over quotas?" Mia gave her a look. "Of course they do. You think I want to stay late every night? I'm trying to keep my job." A deep, uncomfortable truth settled in Lexi's chest. The numbers weren't just numbers, they were lifelines. A single bad week could mean losing everything. "Do they pay you for the extra hours?" Lexi asked. Mia laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "They call it staying committed to success. We call it working for free." Something inside Lexi cracked. She had known about the long hours, the expectations, the hustle culture that had been baked into luxury retail. But she had never truly felt it, never understood the human cost. She had sat in her glass office, while employees like Mia sacrificed nights, weekends, even dignity, all for a paycheck that barely kept them afloat. And yet, she knew it could still get worse. That proof came when she walked past Vanessa's office later that evening. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, she heard hushed voices, Vanessa and someone else. "You fudged the numbers again." The voice belonged to a man. "Relax," Vanessa drawled. "Corporate doesn't check the details, only the bottom line." "You cut payroll again?" "Of course," Vanessa said, bored. "They'll survive." "They always do." Lexi's hands clenched into fists. The employees weren't failing. The system was rigged against them. She backed away slowly, her heart hammering. Everything she had seen, the quotas, the unpaid hours, the deliberate understaffing, wasn't an accident. It was by design. And now she had proof. For the first time since stepping into the store, Alexandra Carter wasn't just disgusted. She was furious. And she was going to tear it all down. Lexi arrived at the store the next morning with a sharp, controlled energy crackling beneath her skin. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She had seen the truth, felt it. And now every second in this place felt like balancing on the edge of a blade. Vanessa had built an empire within Alexander's own, a machine designed to squeeze every drop of effort from employees while manipulating the numbers, just enough to keep corporate off her back. It was deliberate. It was cruel. And worst of all, Alexandra had let it happen under her watch. She couldn't just fix this from behind closed doors. She needed to burn it down from within. Mia was already on the floor, looking paler than usual. Lexi didn't have to ask if she'd spent the night worrying about whether today would be her last shift. The weight of that fear sat in the slump of her shoulders, in the way she avoided Vanessa's gaze. "I don't know if I can pull this off," Mia whispered, barely moving her lips as she adjusted a display. Lexi adjusted a silk dress on the rack, mirroring her movements. "You're not the problem. They are." Mia let out a hollow laugh. "Try telling that to my rent." Before Lexi could answer, Vanessa strode onto the floor, her heels a sharp staccato against the marble. "All right, everyone. I need big numbers today." She clapped her hands as if she were rallying an army before a battle. "We have a VIP client coming in, Damon Carter." Lexi's breath caught. Her brother. Mia perked up. "Carter? As in the CEO?" "No, his brother," Vanessa corrected. "But he has power. Influence. If we impress him, it'll get back to the top. And if we don't," her gaze settled on Mia, lingering with unspoken threat. "Let's just say I'm not in the mood for disappointments." Lexi fought to keep her face neutral. She hadn't expected Damon to show up, but it was the perfect opportunity. If her brother saw what was really happening here, he would back her up. She just had to ensure he witnessed the truth. A sleek black car pulled up outside, and the atmosphere in the store shifted. Employees straightened, anxiety rolling off them in waves. Damon walked in, tailored and effortless, his presence commanding attention. Vanessa's expression transformed into one of sickly sweetness as she approached. "Mr. Carter, what a pleasure." Damon gave her a polite nod, but his eyes were scanning the store. He wasn't easily impressed. Good. That meant he'd notice the flaws if she positioned them just right. Lexi stepped forward before Vanessa could trap him in scripted corporate pleasantries. "Welcome to Elon Lux," she said, deliberately keeping her voice light, unassuming. Damon turned to her, his brow furrowing slightly. For a second, she saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. Something familiar, but out of place before he masked it. "Thanks," he said. "I'm looking for a few things, but I don't want the usual sales pitch." "Perfect. I can help with that," Lexi said. "Follow me." She led him past the polished displays, subtly steering him toward the truth. The overworked cashier struggling to count change, while a wealthy patron drummed her nails impatiently. Mia discreetly rubbing her temples as she fought off exhaustion. The sharks circling, ready to steal a sale the moment someone faltered. Damon's sharp gaze took it all in. Finally, Lexi stopped near the back of the store, away from Vanessa's hovering presence. She turned to him. "Well." Damon crossed his arms. "You look familiar." Lexi smirked. "Do I?" He narrowed his eyes. "What's going on?" She dropped her voice. "I need you to watch. Not as a Carter. Not as a VIP client. Just as a person." Before he could respond, Vanessa's voice rang out. "Lexi." They both turned. Vanessa was striding toward them, irritation bleeding through her practiced smile. "I hope you're not wasting Mr. Carter's time." Lexi met her gaze, unflinching. "Not at all." Vanessa's eyes flicked to Damon. "I can personally assist you, sir." Damon gave her a tight smile. "Lexi's doing fine." Vanessa hesitated, her nails digging into her clipboard. But she wouldn't argue with the Carter, not directly. Instead, she turned her frustration elsewhere. "Mia." Mia flinched. "Yes." Vanessa held up a slip of paper. "You're still behind. Last warning." Lexi saw it then, the way Damon's jaw tightened, his easygoing demeanor stiffening. Good. He was seeing it. Then, the moment unraveled. A woman at the counter, a regular who thrived on belittling the staff, snapped, "Are you all idiots? I said I wanted this wrapped in gold, not silver." The cashier, already overwhelmed, stammered an apology. Vanessa didn't intervene. She never did. The woman turned her sharp glare on Mia. "You. Fix this. Now." Mia hesitated, then reached for the wrapping, her hands trembling. Lexi moved before she could think. "Ma'am, there's no need to be rude." Silence crashed over the room. The woman recoiled. "Excuse me." Vanessa's voice was ice. "Lexi, step away." Lexi didn't move. "I won't apologize for asking a customer to be respectful." Vanessa's lips curled. "Then don't bother coming back tomorrow." The words hit like a gunshot. Mia sucked in a breath. The cashier stopped moving. The other employees froze. Vanessa had fired her. In front of everyone. Damon's voice cut through the air. "That won't be happening." All eyes snapped to him. Vanessa faltered. "Sir." Damon's expression was unreadable, but his tone left no room for argument. "You're not firing her. In fact, I think you and I need to have a long conversation about how this store is being run." Vanessa blanched. I was just enforcing policy." "That's not policy," Damon said coldly. Lexi saw it then, the moment Vanessa realized she had miscalculated. Too late. Damon turned to Lexi, and for the first time, she saw understanding in his eyes. She didn't need to say anything. She could see it sinking in. The moment of truth had arrived, and the game was over. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Vanessa stood rigid, the carefully constructed veneer of control slipping from her face. Around them, the employees barely dared to breathe. Damon's words had shattered the illusion of her authority, and now everyone was waiting for what came next. Lexi could feel her heart pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was the moment. The reckoning. Vanessa straightened, attempting to salvage the situation. "Mr. Carter, Damon cut her off with a glance. "We'll discuss this in my office. Now." It wasn't a request. Vanessa's lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but she wasn't foolish enough to challenge him in front of an audience. Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode toward the back offices, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Damon exhaled and turned to Lexi. "You're coming too." Mia reached for her arm. Lexi gave her a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay." Then, softer, "No matter what happens, things are going to change." Mia nodded, hesitant but hopeful. Lexi followed Damon into the office, her pulse steady. She had spent weeks pretending to be powerless, feeling the weight of rules that weren't meant to protect, only to control. But she wasn't powerless. She never had been. Inside the office, Vanessa stood stiffly by the desk, hands clasped in front of her. The confidence she had wielded like a weapon out on the sales floor was gone. Damon wasted no time. "Explain." Vanessa forced a smile. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Lexi spoke before she could continue. "No, there hasn't." Vanessa's gaze snapped to her. "Excuse me." Lexi met her glare with unwavering calm. "You run this store like a dictatorship. You manipulate sales numbers, underpay your staff, cut corners on payroll, while pushing impossible quotas. You create failure so you can justify getting rid of people. And you do it because you think no one at the top will ever notice." Damon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting the words sink in. Vanessa's composure cracked. "Who do you think you are?" Lexi took a step forward. Then another. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, but she welcomed it. When she spoke again, it was with the quiet, undeniable authority that only the true owner of this company could have. "I'm Alexander Carter." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "No." "Yes," Lexi said simply. The office fell into absolute silence. Damon crossed his arms, watching Vanessa with a look that was part disappointment, part disgust. "I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not." Vanessa's breath came in shallow, panic gasps. I didn't know." Lexi tilted her head. "Would it have mattered if you did?" That was the real question, wasn't it? If Vanessa had known who she really was, she would have treated her differently. But the others? Mia? The cashier? The dozens of employees who came and went, exhausted and undervalued? They would still be suffering. Because Vanessa didn't care. I built this company on integrity, Lexi said, her voice cold. And you turned it into something ugly. Something cruel. Vanessa floundered. I was just following the system. No, Lexi corrected. You built the system. Damon spoke then, his voice final. You're fired. Vanessa made a choke sound, her control slipping completely. Wait. Lexi didn't give her the chance to beg. Security will escort you out. You can collect your things under supervision. Effective immediately. Vanessa's face twisted in something between shock and fury, but there was nothing left for her to say. Security arrived within minutes. She didn't fight them. She knew it was over. As the door clicked shut behind her, Lexi let out a slow breath. Damon studied her. You planned this. She met his gaze. I needed to see it for myself. He nodded, understanding. Then a small smirk. You always were dramatic. Lexi huffed a laugh. And you're still insufferable. Damon chuckled, but sobered quickly. What's next? Lexi turned toward the window, looking out at the store, at the people who had endured too much for too long. We fix it. And they did. The changes were swift and deliberate. Employees were given proper wages, quotas were adjusted to realistic levels, and overtime was paid. Policies were rewritten, prioritizing fairness over exploitation. Mia was promoted. She had always been a leader. She just needed someone to believe in her. For the first time in a long time, the store felt alive. Not just a place where luxury was sold, but where people, real people, mattered. The morning Lexi finally walked back into the store as herself, the energy had shifted completely. The fear was gone. In its place was something stronger. Hope. Mia greeted her with a grin. Welcome back, boss. Lexi smiled. It's good to be home.